So I'm here with Jonathan Haidt from University of Virginia, who is who has a new book out, and the title of the book is exactly
The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion.
And John's been here at UVC. He's given a couple of very interesting lectures, and one of those was on this notion of groupishness. And I'm wondering if you can just tell our audience what, just your elevator pitch on what groupishness is.
Sure. So morality has for so long been studied in terms of two people interacting, and will they be fair to each other, and are they hurting each other? What I've been trying to do is to really retrace, where does our morality come from? Why do we have this incredible ability to create norms, live within sort of a moral matrix, as in the movie The Matrix? And the story that I tell, looking at a bunch of fields, is that it really comes out of a transition to groupishness and tribalism between 150,000 years ago to the present day. We've been living in groups that try to mark who's in, who's out, and then we rally around sacred issues within the group, and once we make something sacred, we can't think straight about it. And once you see this, then I think you can understand politics, because each side has its sacred issues, they don't think straight about them, and they get really moralistic and demonizing about the other side, and they fight it out.
And yeah, I think that, so I haven't had a chance to read the whole book. I've read a chapter and heard you talk about it a little bit. One of the things that I really loved in your talk, one of your talks yesterday, I think the second one, was the way that you framed this new, this revisit of groupishness in the larger cultural sphere. So you talked about how in the 70s we moved into this me decade, and that you had Dawkins with the selfish gene and how that fit with the rise of individualism. And so my question is whether you think that your perspective on groupishness is part of a larger cultural meme that is emerging. Because I think about in the aftermath of the 2008 recession, the notion that free market approaches to the economy, which are very individualistic and very libertarian, were seen as somewhat discounted. And then there is another larger meme that is going on, which is that suddenly social media seems to dominate everybody's lives.
Right.
And so group interaction has become the thing rather than atomized individuals. Do you think that larger cultural thing is affecting scientists in that way?
I'm not sure. I mean, ever since the 19th century, with the rise of the Industrial Revolution, and the rise of a middle class, and the decline of traditional forms of order and group, you have people and sociologists lamenting the decline of family, community, order. And so Ferdinand Tönnies in the 19th century, he contrasted the move from Gemeinschaft, which are these organic, tight communities, to Gesellschaft, which is this market-based society. I think that trend is unstoppable, irreversible. All that happens is people feel that there's a loss, they feel there's something missing, and then they find various ways to compensate. So in the 70s was a big period of humanistic psychology and encounter groups, and people tried to find forms of association that would satisfy their spiritual longings. New Age movements do that. Now we have social media to do that. So I think that does seem to help many people. It certainly can connect people who otherwise might not find their group to be in. But I think that these connections are sort of looser than the ones we traditionally had, which bound us in and seem associated with a greater sense of meaning, purpose, and happiness.
Okay. So now I want to move to what I saw as one of the things that was mentioned in both of your talks yesterday that really got the audience excited, which was that you're going to be appearing in a couple weeks on Stephen Colbert. And it was very interesting that there was this sort of ripple that went through, that goes through the audience of, wow, this is important because it's ending up on Stephen Colbert. But it's actually in fitting with the theme of the kind of discussion that you are provoking, given that this is a university-based audience, and you showed quite clearly that it was a fairly liberal-leaning audience. So there's a sense that, well, this message is now getting right to where I want to see it get to, which is a show that appeals to liberal sensibilities. And so what I want to ask you about is whether or not you think, so the other thing that you talked about was this notion of appealing to emotion to get your message across. And one of the things that you're doing that really interests us here is, in a sense, you're trying to go out and have an effect on public policy, on the larger public discourse.
Right, thank you, on that. I'm not trying to affect public policy, but I'm trying to stop people from demonizing and make it possible for them to think more openly about the costs and benefits of policies. Yes.
And so, given that your message is going forward in the way that it is, let's say you're getting through to the left-leaning part of the world by going on Stephen Colbert. How do you appeal to their emotion rather than their logic?
Right. Well, the first thing is, so my research used to be based on studying moral emotion instead of logic. But gradually I realized that the correct term isn't really emotion, it's intuition.
Okay.
We have all these intuitive reactions to things. Some of them rise to the level of an emotion, but it's really more a question of appeal. Just make things seem intuitively correct, make them appealing, make them understandable, and then give the reasons. So I think an important lesson for anybody interested in persuasion and communication is that the human mind is a really, really good story processor and pattern matcher. Whereas it's not very good as a logic processor. And probably most of the viewers here have been in classes. Everybody's obviously been in classes, been in college-level classes where some lectures are really hard to follow. But embedded in the lecture, maybe there'll be a story. Maybe the professor will talk about something that happened to him yesterday. And it's like, suddenly you can just let go, because suddenly it's like, okay, story. I don't have to exert any effort. My brain will follow this easily. And then it goes back to the laying out of evidence and arguments. So since many moral arguments are basically just giving the other side reasons, here's why you're wrong and I'm right, that tends not to have much of an effect. We're not very good at that. But telling stories, using metaphors, getting people to see patterns, and then applying the same pattern to the issue that you really want to persuade them on, that makes it easy for them to see it from your perspective. So that's one of the skills I'm trying to teach. We waste so much time in moral argument, giving each other reasons, and really it's not going to change your opponent's mind. We're just wasting our time for the most part.
So it's a very interesting commentary that you provide, and I will say that one of the things that we are interested in here at the National Corps for Neuroethics is using the empirical data that we collect about public attitudes to inform policy, not necessarily to shape policy, but at least to inform policy. But it sounds to me that what you're really saying is that if we can tell stories rather than just provide data, then we'll be more effective. And in fact, going back to Stephen Colbert, I've been in conversation with a guy by the name of Dan Sarowitz at University of Arizona. He's a public policy expert. And in our conversations back and forth on how academics can have an effect, one of the big things that he suggests is doing what you're doing, which is actually to write for the general public as opposed to just for each other. But we realized along the way that Colbert's attack on
money interests
has been so brilliant, and in a sense is using comedy to affect public policy by turning it on its head. And it's the kind of ironic ways that we talk about in logical sense, but it's even a better than telling a story. It's sort of performance art.
Well, that's right. Well, parody, I mean, people have feelings of resentment and reactance. This is one of the basic foundations of morality is liberty and oppression, feelings of sort of angry reactance of being controlled or forced to do something. And we all have the sense that at least in the United States, that our government is hijacked by special interests. Occupy Wall Street thinks this, the Tea Party thinks this, and it's true. The people are largely powerless to fight back, but parity is often the weapon of the weak. In fact, there's this interesting research showing, in terms of birth order, comedians are almost always later born. They're not firstborns. Firstborn children are action heroes. They're strong. Laterborns can't fight their older brothers physically, but they develop greater wit. They can beat them on that field.
Well, very interesting, and congratulations on the new book. Good luck.
Thanks so much, Peter.
On the book tour, and thanks again.
My pleasure.
Okay.